Hi guys, this is Ray Gutierrez of Tier 1 Entertainment, CEO and the co-owner of Blacklist International. Welcome to the Beyond the Gaming podcast. I have here what do you call yourself? The something of gratitude?
The Godfather.
The Godfather of gratitude. Yeah, Kerwin Valencia, who is also one of my closest friends.
It was actually supposed to be technically finding a way to say Kuya.
Okay.
Because I am the Kuya or the big brother of so many people, but you couldn't really say the Kuya of gratitude. Branding wise, it wouldn't really work well, or the actually technically like Ninong. And I was like, no, I don't. How do we put this? So
you
I guess
the word
Godfather because
Okay.
it's closest. Plus, there's some sort of slight mafia vibe if you're part of my community.
That's true. That's true.
In a good way, in a happy way,
So on that note, right? Like I think with this Beyond the Gaming podcast, one of the things that I really wanted to achieve was to be able to, like share some of the stories with people that they can learn from the people who are gonna be guests and who are gonna be just conversing with me generally, right? Like so for me, like just chill, like relax. This is really more about having a place where we can discuss things that we're both interested in. And I think on that note, I have heard this story before, but I have never heard it thoroughly and in depth, right? You're kind of like linear career path in terms of how you got into where you are today. But I think when I met you way back in that Gobi event, which you were a speaker in and I was as well, I remember the introduction was you were working with the New York Knicks during that time, or at least used to work, right?
I think I either just had finished or I was still in it. I was in my last year, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to me, like that was such a fascinating thing because I was a super big fan of the NBA. Like I followed it for multiple years already, and just knowing that someone, like in my proximity has worked in the NBA, like really excited me so much, right? So with that being said, can you kind of like share, how did you get to the NBA? What was your story like? How did you end up being in that world?
In that space. That story begins at the age of 18.
18?
As a kid here in the Philippines, trying to discover what he wanted to do in life. And
so you were in the Philippines when you were 18?
Yeah, because I was in Lasalle and Zubel. I was in finishing high school, and it was the period of time. My father was very good about asking us, starting at the age of 14, every year, what your 5-year plan was, what your 10-year plan was. Yeah, I mean.
Was your father from HR? That's very interesting.
I know, but he was just very Japanese.
Okay.
Yes, my father went to Georgia University and Sophia University in Japan, in Tokyo, and he really had that mentality of
having a roadmap.
Having being this almost like this old Japanese businessman thought process. That's how kind of he rolled. And so for him, he needed to understand roadmaps and understand where people were going. Add to that, my grandfather, who was a politician and a servant of the people, he was always somebody to also look forward to, okay, what are the plans? What is the bigger picture? What's the smaller picture? And so, I started in 14. My dad kept on asking me this question already. So at 18, weirdly enough, I already had some formulations of what I want to do. And I remember wanting to tell my dad when he says, hey, one of those days I said, I just want to be like Fred Hickman from CNN Sports.
Okay.
Who I saw Fred Hickman for the first time when I was in 3rd or 4th grade in the States. And the first time I ever saw somebody do sports casting, but made it funny. Before it was Wild World of Sports, everything was so serious, or like, then in sports today, the Knicks beat the Lakers, 85-54. And that was it. But no one's ever did sports and did weird sounds with it, like boom, bang, and hit, and I was like, wow, I loved sports, but also loved entertaining people and broadcasting wise. And I told Dad,
you wanted to be a broadcaster.
I want to be a broadcaster. I want to be in CNN. And my dad would be like, the only 1% of the people actually make it to that. So what happens if you don't make it? You're just going to be a guy wearing a purple velour suit in a cruise ship, introducing different Filipino bands.
I don't know how that.
I was like,
I don't know how he got to that, but okay.
For me, it was the most random thing for him to say. They loved cruises, but he thought of anyone that was speaking on stage to a crowd. If you didn't make it to the big show,
You're gonna get there.
you're likely just going to end up in a cruise ship
Okay.
in a purple velour suit, introducing a Filipino band.
But that's very specific.
He must have just seen that and said, "I don't want my kid to be this guy."
Okay.
So that was the vision. In his
So
head.
he corrected you, is what you're saying.
Yeah, in a sense, he alternated my route, but I said, okay, how can I get into the world that he wants? He was so inspired by my mom's uncle, who was he was a cardiologist in New Jersey, who was beloved by the people.
Okay.
He went to He went to New York, did his fellowship, and then ended up settling in a small town called Lodi. And there, he constantly, even as a fellow, served the people of the town, to the point that when, at that time, Homeland Security or INS came to the house and said, "Hey, look, your visa's done," the people actually rallied for him and lobbied for the senator of the state to grant him a green card,
Okay.
and then in turn citizenship, because he took care of the people. Even the postman that would get caught in a storm, my great uncle would have him stay in their house, in the office, just so that he can get rest before he continues his route. And my father saw this kindness, but also the determination to make sure that that he continued on the path. And that said, one of the weird things my dad was fascinated about was the fact that he changed cars almost every 2-3 years, and then he would tell me about it. Said, if you really want to buy yourself a Lamborghini one day, you need to make sure you be a cardiologist or neurosurgeon, just like your Lola Henry. He changes cars every 2-3 years, which is funny because as I grew older, I realized what he did was he leased cars. Because that's a tax benefit.
Okay.
It's tax deductible. If you lease a car under your business in the U.S., it's a tax write-off. My dad never told me that. He just said, your Lola Henry bought new cars every 2-3 years. No, Dad, he actually leased them. So
It's more of a framing thing.
yeah, yeah. So anyways, so when I was 18, I woke up. I woke up, one morning in complete sweat with this absolute vision in my head of being in a basketball stadium filled with people. The crowd was there, the bouncing of the ball, the lights, the music, the cheerleaders, even the smell of popcorn mixed with the cologne of the coaches.
Okay.
Together, I that
You're
visual,
as specific as your dad.
so specific, exactly as specific as him, with a memory that I had stuck in me, and that came right after I watched the Super Bowl, where I was a fan of the 49ers when I was growing up, and they were in the Super Bowl, and I saw a lady that had the word sports medicine as a specialty. And back then, I didn't even know that was a possibility. I only knew in medicine you were going to be a neurosurgeon, a cardiac surgeon, or cosmetic surgeon, or a family doctor. That's the only thing I knew, because that was the environment I lived in, and that's what my relatives, my titos were, and my aunties were, and I didn't know that there was a sports situation. I was like,
so that opened your world into,
yeah. So
I could become a doctor, but at the same time I could be
still
in
be in
sports.
sports. I was like, I didn't know that was possible. So my mind was racing until that one day when I was 18, that vision I had, it became super clear. And I said, one day that's going to happen. And fortunately for me, 18 years later, that's when it actually occurred at Madison Square Garden.
What did you take then?
So I started with physical therapy as my initial entry point into the medical world. And then as I moved back to the US, did my PT exams here and then PT exams there, I continued on with my sports medicine practice and my sports medicine kind of direction, finishing a graduate degree, finishing my doctoral degree, did fellowships.
Finished a doctoral degree?
Yeah. Did fellowships, internships at Stanford, and did my fellowship at Yale, and ended up in New York City practicing for the first time, really for work, when I was in 2003.
And you mentioned you started your career in sports medicine in the baseball space first.
Yes, but a lot of people don't realize. Everyone thinks that I went straight to the NBA, but it's just like.
So are you like the reverse version of Michael Jordan, where you started in baseball,
Yeah.
and went to basketball? I find that fascinating. But you started in the minor leagues,
and then
eventually you went to MLB.
Went to the MLB after a year.
In which team?
Pittsburgh.
Okay.
With the Pirates.
Okay.
Which is, I was talking about reverse, because my passion was basketball, but I went to baseball first, And then when I got an opportunity to fulfill my passion in basketball, I went.
How did
I
that
went
happen though? Like, does that really happen with a regular, like medical person in the States where you come from a certain sport jumping into another sport just like that?
No, it was wow. I knew I wanted to get to basketball, but any professional sport industry, they'll ask you the question, what professional sports experience you have.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have any, you'll never get in.
Okay.
So for some strange reason, I couldn't get into basketball right away. So I said baseball had openings, a lot of openings and opportunities for internships. So I actually applied for an internship. I went to the Boston Red Sox. They actually accepted me. And then on a workshop, weekend workshop in Vermont, I bumped into the Pittsburgh Pirates guys because I was a kid in a seminar sitting in front of the class where this guru would ask questions and I would answer all his questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the guru, and this guy, Ron Haruska, I will be so grateful for him for starting my journey. He went to the crowd. He'd be like, okay, there's a number of Major League Baseball teams and other sports teams that are actually here in this class right now. You may want to talk to this kid because he's clearly answering every question I ask. So there's something that he knows that many of you probably don't even know yet. So you may want to talk to him. And that, because of that, a number of teams basically took me out to lunch.
Okay.
Not knowing who I really was, what my background was. And the only thing I said was like, I've been working in New York City for the past 2 years, and I took a chance because I said I didn't want to get stuck here in New York City, just working this same clinic. So I said, hey.
A lot of people would want to be stuck in New York City though.
Yeah. But I wanted something bigger. I wanted to make sure that I got myself where I dreamed of. And yes, that's the NBA, but if it wasn't the NBA right away, maybe there's a path. And because the question will be, do you have sports experience? And so maybe the baseball world was going to be that.
So you took that on first, and eventually, how many years did you spend in baseball?
8 years.
8 years in baseball. One year in the minor leagues, and then 7 years in
the majors.
Okay,
yeah.
so let's talk about that first before going into the NBA, right? Like, what was your experience like managing baseball players? Obviously, like the whole, like scene today in the MLB space is different with all of these Japanese players coming in, and a lot of people in the Philippines don't know that too much. But what does it take to be an expert in medicine in the baseball space?
Number one, understand.
What was your day-to-day like?
I mean, day-to-day started at probably about 4:35 a.m.
4:35 a.m.
Waking up.
I can't be in MLB.
It starts with that. You wake up at 4:35 a.m. and then you're at the facility by like 5:45. Because 6 o'clock you start making sure you start filling up water jugs, and you put these water jugs in golf carts, and golf carts you put it in all these fields around, because there's multiple fields and multiple batting cages and multiple pitching areas. And so it's a lot of like grunt work that people don't realize. And on top of that, you're working with so many athletes. I mean, you're not only dealing with your team, but you're also dealing with people who got hurt. You're doing rehab. And then there's the extended teams that are coming in, and all the other kids from all over the world that are trying to get an opportunity. They're like, oh, we're going to have him try out. He's going to join your team for today. And you're like, some kid from Dominican Republic that is a prospect. Everyone's a prospect in baseball. Prospect is the big word. And so you're dealing with all of that. And even at the major league level, even though technically I was responsible for 25 guys on a daily basis during the season, when it came to the extended season, which is the playoffs, now you have 40 people. And on top of that, because I was the head of rehab for the entire organization, I still had to make sure I kept tabs on 180 players in the minor leagues and the people that took care of them. So that's what people forget, that there's so much to baseball. When I was in basketball, I was spoiled because I only had the 15 guys that I had to take care of.
Okay.
And not only that, spring training in baseball is so long, because people start working out on January 2nd. Spring training doesn't actually start till February 14th, 15th, and you don't break camp and then go to your respective, whether you're Major League, Triple A's, Double A, you don't finish that until April 1st. So literally that's spring training, and then April 1st all the way till September 18th is the regular season, and then if you make the playoffs, then you go all the way till pretty much October. And that's,
so it's kind of like a year
and that's
long.
Every day.
Yeah.
It's an everyday
so 4:35
situation.
a.m. every day, taking care of like 100 plus people. That was your day to day. And I understand like a lot of people always talk about their dreams and how it's happening in front of them. but not a lot of people like talk about these things on how you got
Yeah.
there. So that's why I think like touching on that part of your story is key, because like people may see like this was the end goal and you got to the end goal, but this is what they don't see.
Yeah.
Like you had to deal with baseball players and wake up like 4:35 a.m. in the morning and do this routinary stuff that most likely is boring, to get to where you want to be.
I mean, Jack Dorsey, who started Twitter, the founder of Twitter, would always say that, it took 10 years for me to get to where I am, and people think I'm an overnight success. But it took 10 years to create what Twitter was, before obviously selling to Elon Musk. And for me, it was the same way. It's like baseball helped me grow up. It took away the nooks and crannies and the little things that I needed to help myself be the person I was going to be. Because my goal when I got to baseball was to be the best clinician in the entire league. I sacrificed 75% of my paycheck that I had in New York City to work in the minor leagues, hoping that maybe I'd get the payout in the back end. And it did after a year. But most people won't take that risk. You had a pretty cushy job. You're in New York City. You're seeing 30 patients a day. And eventually you can make partner for this firm that you're working with. But I didn't want to do that. So I took a 75% pay cut, lived in small town Bradenton, Florida, bussed 18-year-old Dominican kids driving a van when the weather was 110 degrees Fahrenheit and the humidity was 100%. Because I knew this was something I needed to do. I learned how to work in the world of sports. Not just the clinical part, but the day-to-day, the politics, the conversations that need to be had, how to have conversations, and let alone in Spanish. Because most of the younger kids were all from Dominican, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Colombia. And I had to learn not just regular Spanish, I had to learn Latino Spanish and dirty Latino Spanish too. Because when they would say something, I had to learn so that then I can take care of them.
Okay, so talking about all of the things that people probably don't know, right? Let's get into kind of like the dream then. Like you got into the NBA. And what was that like? How did you get to do that transfer?
Well, I took, what's funny is that after I left baseball in 2012, which was like September, October, I thought I had done everything I could to then get that basketball job. I knew about some jobs. Some friends contacted me and says, hey, I think there's an opportunity happening with the Clippers. There's an opportunity happening with the Orlando Magic. And I was very close to Orlando Magic because we were in Florida. So I would go visit the Orlando Magic facility all the time. I had some friends already working there. Say, yeah, come visit, say hi to everybody, get to know the GM, get to know the basketball operations guy. So I thought I was an immediate fit. I'm just going to go straight from baseball to basketball. That's it. And ironically enough, I became top 2 of both organizations, and actually didn't get the job.
So top 2 doesn't get you the job still.
No, because you need to be top 1.
You need to be top 1.
And that was in December of that year. I left October. By December, I was like, I'm going to get an NBA job. I'll be ready to rock and roll. Nah, just kidding.
Okay.
I was like, and that broke my heart because I thought I did everything. I was one of the best clinicians in all of baseball. I was thinking way beyond what every baseball medical person would talk about. And at the same time, my return to play rate, percentage-wise, was so high that once a guy came off my table, he would never come back.
It's basically your metric in getting people back from rehab to playing.
Yeah, and then they would never come back. They kept on playing after that.
Okay.
And I said, I've done everything I can. I've multiple degrees. I've learned everything beyond what baseball medicine is. So I should get a basketball job, right? They're like,
but you still didn't get it.
No, because the question I had for me was, do you have basketball experience? And I said,
of course you'll never have one until you have one.
Exactly, and that's a double-edged sword. It's like, how can you ask me if I have basketball experience when I was just in baseball? You know what happened in baseball. They're like, well, we ended up picking somebody who had, a year of basketball experience. Like literally was an intern or maybe worked in college. I said, I have basketball experience. I worked in Division I basketball. And I worked in high school, but do you have pro basketball experience, like even semi-pro? And it's like, no. They're like, we're gonna pick the guy that just has even a slightly difference. I was like, damn it.
Okay.
Fine. So I said, you know what? I was hurt. So I said, okay, what do I need to do to maybe one day
get to the
NBA? I said, let me just work on myself, and that's really how I really got fully into personal growth. That's how Mind Valley came to my life. That's how I really found myself going to Burning Man. I said, okay, I need to just make myself better for me, not even for the NBA. And it's because of that everything happened.
Okay, so let's go through that journey then, right? You mentioned about, like, I guess your existential journey and going through the Burning Man and all of these like Mind Valley related stuff, right? Let's get into the NBA. Like, what was the story like you coming into the NBA? How did you get there then?
Yeah, so first, you knew about the dream that I had when I was like 18. That's number one thing. And number two, I always feel like magic happens on my birthday.
Okay.
It really always does.
When is your birthday?
July 2nd.
Okay.
And so at that time, on July 2nd in 2014, I was in Prague.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided on my birthday itself to literally, instead of normally popping champagne, making it rain at some club, I'm just going to give hugs. So I asked a friend if they would join me, two local people, and we went to the middle of Prague in the square, and for 3 hours I hugged about 300 people. Put it all on video, but did it all for myself. And what's funny is in the end, there's an American guy randomly who was completely hammered, came up to me and says, "Hey man, I love what you're doing, man." I go,
"Doing what?"
Giving hugs, being positive on my birthday. It's like, no, not exactly that. But for a guy like me, I think of my months and days, and I say there's 31 days to a month, and each day could be forgettable. But today, you made this day unforgettable for me.
Oh, and he was just in the
you.
sidelines.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was like you made today actually memorable.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that, because I just end up forgetting each day as they pass by. But this day, I won't forget.
Mm-hmm.
And that really hit me. And he says, so just giving back on a day that you're supposed to receive can really change the dynamic of your life. And I said, I'm glad that I'm doing this. I'm just giving. And
Giving away drinks.
No, I wasn't giving away drinks. I was literally just giving hugs.
Mm.
That was what I was giving away, giving hugs. And the end, we were just at the burger place near the river. And this guy came and said, thank you for doing what I was doing. And
Okay.
2-3 days later, I get a call from a buddy of mine who was a consultant for an NBA team and said, hey, what are you doing nowadays? I said, I'm in Prague giving hugs. They're like, the hell? Okay. Hypothetically, if there was a position in the NBA that you'd be in the line for, would you be interested in, excuse me? And it was like, he's like, yeah, I'm just saying that I'm consulting for, I knew exactly who he was consulting for. It's like, would you be interested? And I put the phone, I was like, yeah, I mean, I want more details.
I thought it'd be like, let me check my schedule.
Yeah. No, I was more like that. If the price is right, or I was like, right, tell me more details. I want to know more.
And then?
Yeah, and the conversation happened, and that started a snowball effect. That one call became 2 calls within the week, became 3 calls within the week.
Mm-hmm.
And in a span of 2-3 weeks, I got calls from 5 different NBA teams.
Wow.
Asking if I was
interested. So
interested.
you're actually in a position to pick which team.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was even the point that I had my friends with the Knicks. Somebody even asked me, it's like, hey, you should go with the Knicks. They're a pretty good organization.
So what was the options? Can we talk about the options? Like, what were the 5?
Yeah, so the 5 teams, and I can say this now because I'm not in the league anymore. So
Okay.
the 5 teams, the first one was San Antonio.
Okay.
The second one was...
And what year was this, if you don't mind?
2014.
Oh, 14. Okay.
Yeah, San Antonio, Miami, New York, Chicago, and Detroit.
This was during the Hittles days, right? 14.
2014. This was
LeBron and Wade still. Yeah, I think they were.
Yeah, I think LeBron was still there. And and for me, I was like, wow, this is wild. Detroit was paying the most. San Antonio was paying the lowest.
Okay.
And New York doesn't tell you how much they're going to pay you.
Okay.
And Miami used Coach Eric Spoelstra to be like, oh, you come over here, you and Eric, and like go to the Philippines and do charity work. And I was like, okay, and it was funny Miami was the one that said, we want you to come over, fly here. And I was in Brussels, I think, at that time. And so I made a flight that would go to Miami, but it would stop by New York first because of the layover to then get down to Miami. And so, ironically, as I planned that, New York called me and says, we want you to stop by New York. We'll pay for the difference. We'll have a limo pick you up. We will have a hotel for you to stay in. But we want to have a conversation with you before you fly down to Miami.
Okay.
I was like, okay. And so that's what happened. So they diverted me instead of going through to stop, get off the plane, and pick me up. And they were like, look, you can go down to Miami if you chat with your homeboy over there, and you might be fascinated by the sunshine and everything else. But know that if you don't make a decision right away by the fact that you're the only person we want, we might give it to somebody else. I was like, okay. And how much are what are we talking about? Like, what's the package look like? We'll let you know when you make that decision. I was like,
Okay,
that's weird, cryptic, very like, I thought Miami was the mafia, but you guys are doing a mafia situation here. And so it's funny. So I talked to the Miami guys. I was like, hey, I'm heading over there, but New York, literally, I'm the only person New York wants. And I said, they didn't even know that New York had an opening, but like, oh, I guess it happened. And the guy in Miami said, look, Pat Riley is amazing. To be part of this dynasty that we've created is amazing. But not many people can have an opportunity to say that they not only worked with, but worked alongside Phil Jackson.
because Phil Jackson was in New York
Yeah,
during
he
that
was in
time.
New York.
Okay.
So, and we know that you're the way you are. You're more like a wellness guy. You're like more this mindfulness guy.
He's like a Zen guy.
Yeah, he's the Zen master. So I said, they were like, you have a bird in hand, you have a team that really wants you, and you have a guy that you kind of idolize. That's a
That was a
rare.
perfect storm.
Yeah, that's a rare opportunity. Not to say you'll never be a Heat, but I think, I think you want to listen to that first.
Okay.
And so yeah, they paid.
That's not competitive at all, though. It's like they conceded to the thought already.
I think because for them they had two candidates, me and somebody else.
Okay.
New York said, we just want you.
Okay.
I'm not even thinking about anybody else.
Okay.
And so I think that's what happened. And for me, I said, okay. I went there and I said, what do you want? And I said, well, I want to be in a place that, number one, I have people already in there. I have friends. And my old roommate from baseball was now the head strength coach of the Knicks.
Okay.
And he was there. He's like, yo, you come here, man. You and I, we were working together. It was like our dream. When we were in baseball, we all said, one day, we're going to be working NBA together. I was like, okay, cool.
Let me just check the lineup of the Knicks in 2014. But you go,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Mello,
Oh, yeah.
Amari,
Yeah.
Iman Shumpert. Who else was in there?
Let me check this.
Travis Ware, maybe.
So it's Carmelo, Bargnani,
Bargnani. Oh, God.
Jose
Bargnani.
Calderon,
Jose, yeah.
Gallenberg.
Calderon, yeah.
Interesting. Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah, Timmy, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe let's talk about that experience then. So you got the job,
Yeah.
and then what was your first day like?
Just trying to figure out everything. I mean, figure out like who the coaches were, what role Phil Jackson was going to play in my life. Phil Jackson didn't even talk to me for a month. He just watched me. He did.
Okay.
He literally just watched me for a month. And then literally one day during training camp, we were in West Point, and I leaned down to grab ice for a player, and I feel this ominous figure behind me. And I hear a voice go, well, hello, Erwin. I heard you were the person that I need to talk to regarding my own ailments. And I was like, Mr. Jackson? I was like, yes, it's me. I was like, it's like a James Earl Jones situation that's happening here. And I said, yes, how can I help? And he was like, let's talk. I have many things that have occurred. I'm sure you can find that. But let's chat. I will leave you a message for us to chat. And I was like, well, okay. And that was after a month. It's kind of strange. But then his relationship and I was one of my favorite things ever, as somebody who had so many life experiences and somebody who also had that thought process of to think beyond the game and how to make the game better because you think beyond the game. And so yeah, so my first day was fascinating because I was trying to figure out everything.
But I want to understand, right? Like, how does kind of like the mind conditioning goes, like for the people who play on the level of an NBA? Because I feel like the Philippines is so fascinated by the game of basketball, and obviously what they see is what's in the court, some of the rumors that are out there. But what does it really feel like interacting with the players, like looking at how they prepare, how they go through rehabs and recover, and all of these things? Like, what do you think is kind of like the general experience in terms of the mindset? What's your general experience in terms of like their mindset?
Let's put this way.
Because I want to kind of like break the romanticized
Yeah.
of like what the NBA is and what it really is.
Let's just put it this way. The difference between the 15th player in the bench and the starting five is pretty massive.
It's massive.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the starting five plays on a different level or are just in a different level of mindset?
We're just talking about the physicality first.
Okay.
From the physicality, giftedness, whatever you want to call it. But the difference between a starting five and let's say an all-star is also maybe the raw understanding and IQ of the game.
Okay.
That's what makes you an all-star. But then from an all-star to the 1%, which is a superstar, that's all mindset. And so that's the massive difference. What people don't really see is that the reason why LeBron is LeBron, because he takes the time to make sure that he is LeBron and what it takes to be that. The reason why Jalen Brunson, who even though people don't see him as a superstar, he's a superstar, but he's a blue-collar guy that works his ass off, that has a mindset that like, I've been doubted all my life, I'm gonna come after you. And that's the difference. There's a difference in mindset of Luka, who started playing professionally at the age of 13 against 30-year-old men, leaving his home in Slovenia to play for a Spanish team, not even knowing how to speak Spanish, and saying that if he transitioned to the NBA, that he'd still be just some European guy that would shoot threes from the corner. And he said, okay, how can I be better? And so what he did is like find out a way to really, what is he better than everybody else? And so there's actually an interview of somebody just recently about how he spoke to the founder of a company called P3 that does all these data performance analytics in Santa Barbara. And what they found with Luka was he's not a jumper. He'll never be a jumper. So he said, but what is he good at? What is he the best at?
Deceleration.
Start and stopping. And that start, stop, and the second step. And I said, well, why don't we enhance that and make you that better? But for Luka to say like, well, I still want to jump higher. He's like, well, it's not going to happen. So for him to say,
okay, I accept my
you know what?
weaknesses.
I accept my weaknesses. I'll be the greatest with what I have the most. That takes a certain type of personality and takes a certain mindset to say like, I'm going to enhance this because this is where I'm going to kill everybody. So that's the difference between a superstar and even an all-star, is the knowing the fine-tuned things that they have within them that they can make better.
I think this is what's really fascinating for me, right, when it comes to sports, and I think this is where I really want to start the discussion, right? Like, I think I have a lot of like questions in my head after hearing all of your stories and obviously with your experience, right? Let's talk about this, right? In life, a lot of people would always want to refine their strengths, cover up their weaknesses with their own selves, right? Like sometimes people would say, oh, these are my weaknesses, I need to improve this and that. But at times in sports, especially in the level of an NBA, right, sometimes they don't even try to fix their weaknesses. Instead, they would double down on what their strengths are. For example, you see someone like Steph Curry like doubling down on threes instead of like forcing his physicality to be there, for example, or like whatever, you know. Like I think what I'm saying is that doubling down on your strengths and being aware of your weakness is kind of like key. But how do people really get there? Is the coaching staff of the NBA, are they guiding them to get there? Is it more of a personal thing, an individual mindset kind of like thing? And what's your thinking on that, Jen?
Yeah, number one, it takes a certain realization for that person to be okay with knowing that they're seeing things that they can't
do.
I had one of our managers, one of our great managers from the Pittsburgh Pirates, Clint Hurdle, a very amazing human being. One of the guys that really inspired me to really go on journeys and give back while traveling the world. One of my favorite sayings of all time is something he said. He says, "There's only two things you can control in this world. It's attitude and effort, and the rest of it you leave up to the universe." And he says that because there's sometimes that you feel like you should be doing something, but maybe you're not born to do that thing. So why don't you lean into that things that you were actually born to do and destined for, than trying to knock your head into things you're not supposed to do.
And if that's the case, like, what's the right attitude then? I mean, at least in your
that's it. So the right attitude is saying like I'm going to give it my best, but when it comes to the understanding that maybe there's something I'm better at doing, then be okay with like, no, I'm going to double down on this, and putting the effort in it. So that's why the only two things you can control: attitude and effort. The rest of it, you have to just let go.
And I think you talked about this, right? Like, because I was trying to refer to like the importance of mindset, whether it's in sports or like in the corporate world or generally in life, right? You mentioned to me that when we were talking about mindset, you need kind of like the tools to hone, like yourself to become Kobe, or like to at least have that mindset. Like, what are the tools available for like people generally on that note?
I'm
actually curious, like myself.
Yeah, there's a number of things. Number one is self-awareness. Knowing who you are is the number one tool to understand what kind of mindset you can put to yourself. And even that thought process itself is a mindset of be able to understand, okay, who am I? Who am I authentically? And by understanding that, it allows you then to move forward, because you need a baseline. And a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is experiences in life. It's like, how do you like your eggs? I remember when I was younger, we had this thing. I don't know if you remember the slam books, the autograph books, whatever you want. But it was funny for me, even though I say like it was a cheeky kids thing.
It gave you kind of like the questions that you needed for you to understand yourself more.
Yes, of who you are. It's like, what color do you really like? Like, and funny enough, that's why I think sometimes, our generation, we're relatively pretty good at branding, because we kind of know who we are, and we want to know if somebody is that, how do we make them better? Because of the awareness. So self-awareness is number one. And so the tools to self-awareness is obviously trial and error. Two, is being comfortable with yourself with regards to who you are in your group, understanding your role. That also has self-awareness. Wow. So, okay, who am I? The
funny guy?
Am I the funny guy? Am I the leader? Am I the person that brings the drinks? Am I like, am I the charitable person?
Why do you think is that
the
important?
Driver? Huh?
Like understanding your role in a team. Like, why is that important in your mind?
Because that's how a team works. By understanding who you are in a team, that's how success as a team works. Now, as an individual, if you're playing tennis by yourself or a golfer, all of that has to come into one person.
Yes.
But if you're part of a team, by understanding the role, that's the best way to find success. And the only way that happens is usually spending time with each other growing up. I mean, the dynasty from the Warriors started because they all got drafted young at an early age, and they all grew up together.
What they could contribute to each other.
Yeah, and it took 5 years for Steph Curry to be Steph Curry. It was his 6th year in the season that he became who he was. But he also understood what Draymond Green played in his life. He understood what Klay Thompson played in his life. So they all had certain roles that they all played. And by doing that, they created a dynasty. I mean, same thing with Jordan, with Pippen, even though Pippen has a weird situation that's going on right now. And then Dennis Rodman. Michael knew who Dennis was. How can we make Dennis better? First of all, let Dennis be Dennis. If he wants to go to Vegas, wear a wedding dress and go party like a rock star, then let him party like a rock star, because when he comes back, he's done with it and he's ready to rock. No, I mean, let's be honest.
That's interesting. And that's so true also, right? So are you trying to tell me that in the end, in terms of being able to unlock your full potential, you need to at least, one, understand who you are, and second, understand your role in a certain group so that you can unlock that team dynamic, and then eventually that team success that you could achieve in life?
Yeah, I mean that, and also the exercise I always like to have people when it comes to looking at life bigger and dreams. Also, the people that I coach, is that you ask yourself, what is your why?
Your purpose.
In the end, yes, but even bigger, why you do things. I think sometimes people get so distraught with the purpose that they get so confused. I don't know. I don't know what my purpose. I don't know what purpose is. But in the end, like, why do you wake up in the morning? It's like, I want to live life. But why do you want to live life? So it's an exercise that we do that I almost call it the 5 whys. We go down, down, down. And then in the end, you're like, you know what? I want to make my mom and dad proud. Okay. But then why?
I know this. I read this book called Successful Habits of Millionaires, and they call this exercise as 7 levels deep.
Yeah.
They would ask the same question over and over and over again as the answer, right?
Yeah.
And by the 6th or 7th question, they would get to the real reason of their why.
Yeah.
I think was kind of it, right?
Because people hide behind their actual reasons in fear of shame.
And sometimes they don't even know themselves
Don't even know
anymore.
exactly. Oh, that's why self-awareness is such a massive part of having that right mindset to get you to where you are. Because once you know who you are, then you can say, hey, I don't give a fuck because this is who I am. I'm authentically me. You accept it or you don't. It's up to you. It's your problem. It's not mine.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this as well, right? Like, I think the whole world nowadays, especially in social media, has really changed a lot in terms of what it is. I was talking to like a lot of the people in my team that during the whole cancel culture era, like a lot of people were always playing it safe because they didn't want to be crucified by the Twitter world or the internet generally, and they opted to be in the neutral side, not representing anything, not siding on anything, just because it was safe. It felt safe. You were safe.
Yeah.
But nowadays, right, like you see someone like Trump, you see like other celebrities are taking sides, whether it's A or B. And because of this, there's so much polarized thoughts in that A and B. And for some reason, people are actually resonating to people who are speaking their minds and who are picking sides, because neutrality and safety also means you're not about anything. What's your thought on that, especially as a New Yorker? Because like in New York, you're so much open and accepted to be yourself.
Yeah. I think that's where I learned to have this mindset of, you know what, I'm going to be who I am and I'm going to express myself accordingly. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry.
Maybe you tell your
Yeah.
Carmelo story,
Yeah.
because I think that's a very interesting story.
So I mean, I remember, I remember a game once, and there's somebody screaming his lungs off at Melo, screaming. He's like, "Hey, you washed up," or "Oh, like, you should pass the ball more. Stop hogging the ball." And Melo just would simply say, "Hey, look, I'm here, you're there. That's all I gotta say." I mean, it's right. I mean, in reality, what people forget, they can armchair coach as much as they can, but until you're in the shoes of the person who you're trying to tell what to do, you really can't say anything. I mean, I think that's why sometimes I have a challenge with politics. I don't like politics because too many people have so many opinions about certain politics, but they're not willing to put themselves into that situation.
Yes.
Oh, it's like, it's their job. I was like, yeah, but if you want to say something, then get into their job so you can understand what that job is about, and then you can tell them what to do. And I think that's part of why, for me, it was important to me to finally fulfill the dream of getting to the NBA, because I want to be able to like debunk a lot of myths that people think that when you're there, especially as somebody who's Filipino, to get to the NBA and work on an everyday basis for almost a decade, to say like, when people say, you're lucky you got there because maybe you had connections. I'm like, I didn't have any connections. Or, you're you were lucky because you're well off because you're able to like study in UP and then you got there. It's like, it doesn't matter where you study. Everything I've done is a combination of understanding what it is I really wanted, putting my ass to work really to be able to like make sure that I went to every networking situation. I went to the schools and I tried to get myself as good as possible. So when the phone call came, I was ready. And number 3, I allowed the universe to do its work. Because what happens when you push, that's usually the time that's like, hey, you're trying too hard. It's the moment you let go, the magic actually happens.
Here's my question though, right? Talking about, like how people who are super confident and self-aware about, okay, this is me and that's you. And I get that and I respect that, and I think that's very, like what's the right word? I think that's very
Admirable.
yeah, admirable, right? But at the same time, where does the audit comes then, right? Like when do you get audited in terms of like how you behave as a player in a way, right? In terms of like the NBA, for instance, because the fan comment is the fan comment, but
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know if it's true or not, right? But sometimes the bashing has its merit too.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a merit to someone being a ball hog or someone like shooting too much threes or like I don't know. Like how do you find the balance of using that as a feedback versus treating it as just as a noise?
So, if it interrupts your game for you to continue at the highest level, then it's something that has to be said. Or what the NBA has done now, so that there's no direct interaction that occurs, so that there's no distraction, if you must.
They're not allowing the players to use the phones anymore, right?
Well, no, number one, that. Number two, they make sure there's security guards.
Ah, yeah?
Each team has 2 or 3 security guards, and the director of security will go in the back, be like, hey, there's somebody who's heckling, can you check him?
Mm-hmm.
If he's doing something not really rude, just expressing himself, that's fine. But the moment a swear word comes out, you're out of the game.
Okay.
Because now it's not just about you and the player, it's the kids that are surrounding you now.
Mm.
So in a way, the NBA has done a really good job on making sure that if you are going to say something, be it in good taste, you know. And I think that's one thing that I've learned through the years is like, oh wow, there's somebody heckling. Like it's funny in Indiana or OKC, when they heckle, it's very wholesome. They're really swears because they're really nice Christian people. So for some, it's almost funny how they like scream at you. It's like, you're awful. This is horrible what you're doing. And you're like, this is actually funny. I'm not even insulted. You're like, okay, sure.
But in New
like,
York,
my bad. You know, my bad. But in New York, it's different. And one of my favorite stories to tell is the challenge in New York, and why New York fans are like the Ginebra of Philippine fans, is because New Yorkers, a lot of them who are New York Knicks fans, are hardworking people. They're people who are blue-collar workers, construction workers, janitors. And imagine going to watch a New York Knicks game at Madison Square Garden for you and your little boy. You know, if you're a dad and you want to bring your kid to a game because you may want to make his dreams come true, that night would already set you back $500. That's
just the money that they
$280 tickets for the nosebleed seats all the way in the back, the transportation on the train to get you and your kid to the arena, the hot dogs that cost $10, the drinks that cost $12, and maybe the shirt that he wants that costs $60. So in the end, that's a $500 game, and that's for one night. And that money could pay rent, money for school, for books. So they have their opinions of what they want to say because they're putting their hard-earned money to a game that they love, and the game is not showing them what they're worth. And so New Yorkers have the right to say what they want to say.
Okay, that's a fair perspective.
Because imagine this, this is hard-earned money. I mean, we're not. Yes, you'll have the people sitting in Celebrity Row that pay the $10,000 seats and all that stuff, but those are hedge fund guys. I mean, $10,000 is a dinner for them. But those blue-collar workers, that's why they're the most rabid fans in all NBA, because of the fact they work their butts off to get those seats.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, the organization or the team doesn't show up.
So in your experience, right, like just wrapping up some of the NBA kind of like stories for us, right? In terms of like what the Carmelos of the world think like, and versus obviously like the ones in the end of the
bench,
right? What do you think is the biggest difference?
It's mindset I was talking about.
Yeah, but like what particular mindset?
It's the understanding that they can dominate.
Okay.
And NBA is a game where if one person is hot, they will dominate. I mean, it's different from baseball. I mean, yes, Shohei Ohtani is amazing because he pitches and he hits at the same time. But without the other players in the diamond, the game doesn't go on. But in basketball, if one guy has a hot game, he will dominate. But a lot of that is a perfect storm of a good night, maybe a team that's going through something, and a mindset of the leader that says, we are going to win tonight.
Okay, so I guess like just a final question. It's just a curious question on my end, right? Like obviously Carmelo's like one of the greatest players, like in that era. And knowing that he didn't get to have a championship, what do you think is kind of like the missing piece in terms of, was it him? Was it the whole team? Was it like more of?
There's so many factors to
Of course.
that, but the one thing that people don't realize that is really hard to win in New York.
Really?
It's not even.
It's the environment.
It's the environment. I mean, it's not just what I told you about the blue collar workers that have the right to heckle you whenever they want because they work their butt off to be able to go to watch these games, but it's the fact that when you're in New York,
The lights are too bright.
the lights aren't just too bright. There's people that are around you that will give you lights, and that's the challenge. It's like it's this number one expectations that you have to win yesterday, but also the fact that like you look around and you got billionaires sitting in front, celebrities sitting in front, and you're just like, no, I'm not distracted, but I'm kind of distracted. Because why? Because you're playing with the Knicks. A billionaire could be a whisper in your ear while you're in the middle of the court and be like, hey, let's have a meeting tomorrow. I want to see how we can do business. And you're like, I'll take that. You're joking around. You're maybe like, no, I'm focused right now. But in your ear, you're like, wow, if a billionaire wants to have a chat have lunch with me, why won't I entertain that?
Okay.
I
get that. It's because there's so much opportunities, so much popularity and stardom kind of like thing. Like it really makes me curious that at times, like people always say that playing with Blacklist International, for example, in the Philippines, usually feels different when you're playing in other orgs just because of the popularity that it has. And given that it adds so much pressure to the players because of the social media attention. And I think we've experienced that in the past in terms of like all of the teams that we've had. Some people with some players can overcome that pressure, but some players can't. And I think the same way, connecting it to influencers, for instance, right? In my experience, like working in Tier 1, I've seen people who, when they get to a certain level of popularity, they'll go through an issue, they'll fold, and they'll never come back just because they're not just ready for the pressure, they're not ready for the hate, and they can't kind of like get past that level of unacceptance of the world, and they would just shrink. But at the same time, they would probably want a different life of like just resting or whatever. But the point is, do you think, like in terms of talking about mindsets, is this also key in terms of an influencer or just someone generally in life? Do you think like every person goes through a certain, I guess, like cap?
I think that in my personal opinion, I think we're all limitless, but if you're not prepared to break the ceilings that are above you, then you are limiting yourself. And I think what people need to do is continue to do the work, because
maybe it's capped today, but tomorrow
will be better. But you have to do something about it. If people just say like, "Oh, I'm going to give up," then you'll never be able to break that ceiling. To be able to get to that, to call yourself limitless. But if you say, you know what, I will take this on as a challenge. Once again, it's a mindset. You'd be like, this is where I am now. I want to rise above. And whether that's something you learn from your parents, whether it's something you learn from your culture, whether you've gone through a traumatic issue, some of the greatest players maybe have had challenges in their childhood, whether it had to be not having a father figure, or whether it be growing up in a place of disadvantage, but they use that as a chip on their shoulder to try to then rise above. But those who sometimes have never gone to a situation that they were challenged and are challenged now for the first time because of the comfort they have for such a long time, then it's harder for them to rise above.
I get that.
And I think that's, for me, as my own personal opinion and gripe of the current culture of my, like, let's say, the younger generation, my nephews, where they're getting trophies just for having a nice smile during a tournament. I'm like, really? Why do you deserve a trophy? It's like, you didn't win.
It's like you're rewarding someone for a participation.
Just participation. Like, but then it doesn't train them for what would happen in real life. Because in real life, you don't get a trophy for having a smile. You're either going to get the deal or you don't. You either win the championship or you're not. When it's actually, when you're in business, you can't sulk because the person the client you're trying to sell to doesn't want to buy from you. And you can't be like, oh, I tried. But did you really try? Or did you just give up because you're not used to getting no?
Actually, this is such a very interesting thought to me. Like, come to think of it, when you're talking about like how Mello thought of like, I'm here, you're there. You're talking about like this example, for instance, of like participation trophies in a way, right? What really comes to mind for me is that in this world of social media nowadays, right? It's just free to comment.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the stars or people who are just available publicly are out there trying to post something that they're working on. Like they're out there posting things that they are working on,
Mm-hmm.
that they care about and all this. And sometimes the unfair part of the world is all of these bystanders or people who are just watching are entitled in feeling that I could say anything to this person and they won't get hurt because they're not a human being. you know and I've experienced that myself, like in the recent, like decision that we made, like in the MLBB exit. Like, people felt like they all have the rights to say the bad things because they're feeling this and that. And maybe sometimes that doesn't really get to people in terms of like what that comment really means to the person that they're saying it to. For some people, they wouldn't care and they would be like, I'm here, you're there. But for some other people, it could mean something to them. They're actually affecting real lives, right? So I guess from my point of view, like, I've gotten to a point of my career where I don't really care as long as I know that the comment really isn't valid. But obviously, like, for the comments that are valid, I take that as a feedback. It's kind of like how I'm looking at it, right? With that being said, in terms of talking about complexity caps, I think this is something that you've touched on. And before we end, because I think I want to wrap up in a few minutes. One concept that I really believe in, and something that I read before, was a concept of a complexity cap. That any company or any person would always go through a certain ceiling in a certain phase of their life, just because that cap, that complex experience or that complex stage of their life serves as a cap at a certain point until they break them, or until they become comfortable in feeling that they don't have to break the ceiling anymore, right? So what it means basically is, if I'm a group of people working in a company and there's a certain complexity cap, if we don't break that anymore, then we're gonna stay here. But once we break that, the thing is, you might think that things will get easier, but the reality is, as you go up, there will be more complex situations, and there will be another cap, another cap, another cap, another cap, because that's just how ambitions work. That's just how, I guess, the world works, where you just go up and up and up, right? And I think being able to have that right mindset is really key, like what you're saying, because I think without that, you won't ever break that ceiling. What are your thoughts on that in terms of like breaking your complexity cap?
Well, you can go a number of ways there, and one of the things that has surfaced quite some time now regarding the research of how people grow, and essentially is even just simply looking at what people consider as the 7-year itch of the transition people go through, almost 7-8 years, almost perfectly,
in a romantic relationship,
or even in real life.
Really?
And I say that is because every 7-8 years,
so the 7-year itch also exists in like just your life,
because of the fact our DNA completely starts shedding and forms brand new again, and our genes start expressing themselves every 7-8 years. So you would say the romantic way, and romantically, because of the fact that you've spent this enough years, let's say, with somebody, and you're just like, are we growing? because that's when your body actually grows. I mean, people even say,
so what you're saying is, biologically speaking,
yes, there's a biological
7-year itch really exists because someone's DNA grows after 7.
Yeah, 7-8 years. So even that's why people would say that if you become intimate with somebody, that person's DNA is inside of you, and it stays there for about 7 years. So that's why some people have a hard time when they get through a bad breakup, because especially if they've been intimate, that person's DNA is inside of you, and so that shedding occurs only within the 7-8 years. So weirdly enough, the 7-year itch comes from a biological situation as well, and it's not even from the just purely romantic, but that's also you as a person. So hence the reason why personal growth is so important, and and why people feel like at the period of time maybe you need to take a sabbatical, or maybe you need some time off, or you need you need to do a different strategy, because biologically that is actually what's happening. And so funny enough, I found myself not just a person who have gone through this multiple times, but also finding myself coaching people who are going through these transitions, not necessarily in the romantic side, but in their own personal journey, especially career-wise.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, then who am I now? Like, why am I getting suddenly bored of what am I doing? Or why doesn't it excite me anymore? I don't feel like I'm getting higher in my corporate job. It's because you yourself are not self-aware enough to say, like, what am I not doing, or what should I be doing in order to make sure I'm elevated, not just in my career, but as a human being in general. And I think for me, that's really important to make sure that you continuously push yourself that. And for higher performers, that's even more challenging, because high performers, the line between understanding whether you're moving forward is so tiny that if you shift something, then it changes everything. Because you're such, I mean, you're top tier, you're tier one, no pun intended, but you're at that level already. So finding a shift that occurs within that period of time, you have to really make sure that you're already above there before that shift happens, that you've done the work before that happens, so that when it does happen, you're ready for it.
You know what? I really resonate to like what you're saying, and I think one thing that I would also want to mention is that the same way, I guess, in life, like the leadership cycle also kind of like is there in any company. Like sometimes you have some leaders who will be there for a certain stage of your company. As it enters into a new stage, then it becomes a different group of leaders, and the next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage after that. Just because, from my experience, for every different group of people that you are with, it also changes the whole dynamic of it.
Mm-hmm.
The dynamic changes, the culture changes, the ambition changes. And I think as much as we've talked a lot about self-awareness and how you contribute to a team, like who you are with in the team is also as important.
Yeah.
Right? And I think like maybe that's where I want to live this podcast with. Maybe where I want to end this podcast in. Yeah, I think personally, like we've met and known each other for a long time, but we never really like talked like this. I never really knew what your journey was, and I think that's really interesting. But I guess like maybe we can do this again, like talk more about like general mindset and other things. But for me, I'm just happy that like I've met you. I think every time we talk about like mindsets and the general trends of the world, whether it's a coffee rave development of the cities of the world, or like Web3, or like whatever else, I think
Or
it's always
social wellness clubs,
Yeah,
the next
social-
thing,
yeah.
the next thing.
It's always like very interesting for me, and yeah, I just want to say thank you. And I guess on that note, right, like maybe you want to say anything to the viewers, like leave anything to the viewers, like in this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, over there. Yeah. So one story I like to say as I end this is that when I first got the job with the Knicks, somebody from ABS-CBN flew over and covered me when this happened. He was actually allowed at that time to basically have a whole afternoon with me and interview me. And one question stood out. He asked me, what advice do you have for kids in the Philippines so that maybe one day they can get to where you are? And I don't know what happened exactly like this. The microphone was right in front of me, and it just dawned on me when it came up, that insight just downloaded, and I said, you know what? I have 3 things. 1, visualize it. Like knowing exactly what it is that you want when you're about to fulfill that dream. Because if you're not clear with absolute clarity to the point that you can smell it, see it, taste it, it's not going to happen. Number 2, prepare for the path. Meaning that if you need to really do all that you can do the work, make the sacrifices. If you don't do all of that, then it's harder for you to really get to where you are or where you want to be when you get that call, because you're not ready. And then 3, manifest it. Sometimes, as I talked about earlier, we try to push so much that we expect things to happen. But it's in those magical moments that we let go that's when the universe actually does its job and actually grants us our wish. So it's important to have a framework. And for me, that framework that I came up with is exactly that. So if you have a dream, if there's something that you've always wanted to achieve, think about it. Visualize, prepare for the path, and manifest it. And hopefully that brings you to where you want to be, because magic's going to happen to everybody.
Boom. Okay, that's super cool. I think for me, I just want to say thank you, Erwin, for being here, of course, in my podcast. For all of those who are listening, hopefully, like I get to bring like people of his level, like into this podcast so that you can learn more about, like partly who I am, who I'm with, like most of the time, how I think about things, and hopefully, like you learn a thing or two. I think what I can leave to the audience, at least from my perspective, in terms of a mindset is, I think number one, you always have to be sure about your own dreams. Because a lot of people in the world will always doubt your ideas, your thoughts, and everything. And it's just natural sometimes for people to doubt. But at the end of the day, those who will achieve their dreams are the ones who firmly believe that it is possible for them to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Because once all of these doubts come in and all of these like questions come out, right? If you don't have the answers for it or the will to push through, then there's just no way you're gonna get there. So I think that relentlessness in terms of what you believe in is key. That stubbornness of what you believe in is also like key, right? Like I think that's my first thing. On a second note, it's also surrounding yourself with the people who will send you the right feedback, not to just audit you for fun, but more on auditing you to improve. Because I think that's very important. Because sometimes you are surrounded with people who will just tell the bad things about you. But why are they saying it? What's the purpose of them saying it? I think having the right intentions in providing feedback will not just allow you to understand your negative side, but it will also allow you to understand that this is the negative things about me, and this is how I can improve on it. Because hearing that feedback from them, you know that it's coming from a right place, rather than just from a point of complaint or just from a point of just hurting you, right? I think that's very important. Like number two, and I think last but not the least, always surround yourself with the people who will say no to some of your thoughts. Like we talk about like a term called yes man, right?
Yeah.
Like having yes mans around you are good, partly at times, because it provides you the motivation, it gives you kind of like that energy of feeling that I'm the man or like I'm the woman or whatever it is. But in the end, like the people who will say no to you will kind of really challenge you as well, whether there is a merit to what you're really thinking, what you want or what you want to do. Because sometimes doubts really aren't that too bad. You just need to be able to find the right answers for those doubts within yourself. And I think by the end of it all, my last point is understanding that you need to stay in the game is the most important mindset that you have to have. Because the moment that you quit, that's the only time that you've really lost your way into what you want to achieve, right? So yeah, I guess those are my thoughts, and hopefully like you learned a thing or two. Peace, goodbye, thank you.
That's it.
Yeah.